Wearing our hate on our sleeves. Hi, I'm Scott.
Hi, I've got sleeves on, and I'm Mark.
And this is Church is Lame, the podcast where we try to fix the church by talking about the stupid things churches do that break the entire body.
Okay, so what's up with sleeves now? Like, is it like a sleeve length requirement or something, or what's going on here?
Yeah, so I've got a pair of stories here that I'm just going to kind of group together. We're going to discuss.
Okay.
The first one comes from alternate.org, and the second one comes from religionnews.com. The first one says that the Oklahoma GOP candidate says it's totally in the right to execute gay people. Right? And this, Scott Esk, who's running for a seat in the House, made that comment in the past. And the second story, Arkansas senator agrees to unblock atheist constituents on Twitter and Facebook. Right? And so this is a senator who, like, every time somebody comments at him that he doesn't like, he just blocks them, even though they're his actual constituents, and he's supposed to be representing them.
I mean,
right?
You're just speaking in intelligent common sense type stuff.
Right. Kind of hard to represent people if you refuse to listen to what they have to say, and you don't understand their ideas.
Not that Twitter is, the best place.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, so my point is this. We no longer go around town wearing white sheets over our bodies with our white cone heads to proudly proclaim our membership in the KKK. Very few of us go around anymore with a swastika armband on our sleeve to identify our support of the Holocaust or of white supremacy. But it seems to me in America that the cross is less and less the symbol of the love of God and becoming more and more the symbol of the hate and intolerance of Christians. And that's what I mean by wearing our hate on our sleeves.
Yeah.
It is now politically expedient and beneficial to wear hate on our sleeves as politicians in the knowledge of knowing that's good for a couple of votes.
Yeah, like if you're saying that, it's okay to just execute people who just because they're gay.
Right.
And I'm assuming he wants trans people in on that as well.
Right. I mean, his whole argument is basically like, I'm just a Bible believing Christian, right? And he forgets the part where, like, well, if you go back into that part of the world thousands of years, they don't have a conception of homosexuality that we do today, right?
I think that goes without saying.
Right. Well, I don't think it does, because otherwise these things wouldn't be happening, right? Right. But they're like, so to go to that excuse of, well, I'm just a Bible believing Christian. Well, if you are just a Bible believing Christian, then believe it correctly and understand it correctly and actually understand that these words that you're interpreting as gay or homosexuality is not actually how they were meant to be understood when they were written by the original authors. Drives me nuts.
Yeah, as it should. And, even if it did, these things mean what you think they mean, right?
Yeah.
When you're talking about a group of people that don't understand where being gay comes from, and I'm not just simply referring to people who vote Republican here. Although that it does seem to be the case frequently that you hear like more from them than people on the other side, right? That, like it's a choice. It's like, well, nah, not so much. And so it's like they're writing it from a perspective where they think it's a choice. And if you're right in that, then sure, a lot of what, people wrote then was fairly sensible. But we know better now, or at least we should know better now.
Right. And even if we don't know better, we are the church, and we are not supposed to be operating from a place of hate. That is not our justification. That is not our inspiration. Hate is that thing that we are supposed to be casting out from our lives.
Right.
Joy, love, humility, peace, forbearance. These are supposed to be the things that fuel us. And to see the leaders of our country who claim not only to be political leaders, but who also claim to be Christian leaders, so openly evangelize hate as their primary belief of choice is neither leadership nor is it spiritual.
No, and it's the worst kind of thing, it's because the argument here is like, okay, well, it's a sin. All right. Well, then by your definition, anybody who does some kind of thing that's a sin, who just doesn't want to stop doing it, I guess the answer is death penalty.
Yeah.
So like, are you a prostitute? I'll just say sex worker in general, because that term's more, encompassing. And you don't want to give that up. Okay. Death penalty.
Yeah.
Like that's where this ends up going. That's the logical end of it. I'm not being an absurdist by saying this.
Yeah.
What you're saying is that like, this is not a thing that the Bible says is worse than any other sin for some reason.
Right.
There's only one, unforgivable sin, which it calls blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, which is, it's a whole complicated thing. Basically, if you're worried about it, you haven't done it, is kind of what it comes down to.
Exactly. And by the way, it's not the gospel. The gospel is we are all sinners and God loves us anyway. He loved us so much that Christ went to the cross and dealt with all sin. Not just one sin, not today's sin or yesterday's sin or even tomorrow's sin. He dealt with all sin on the cross.
Yeah.
So, like, as good as it feels to keep defining us and them, it is the opposite of the gospel. The gospel is we are all on this sin bus together. And the only reason we get to be on the sin bus is not because of our beliefs or what we claim, but because of what Jesus did.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's not us, them. It should be we, us.
Exactly
and
right.
The faster that Christians can understand the we, us dichotomy, the faster other people will want to be part of the we, us thing.
Right.
I know that didn't sound terribly articulate, but
no, it's a hard, slow road because right now Christians in America refuse to admit that the mission seems to be to beat liberals at all costs. That seems to be the game at the moment. And until we can recognize that one reality, there's little hope of making any progress.
Yeah, and we need to stop this whole this mentality that we can associate Christianity or Jesus with a specific political party. That's damaging. That's creating divisions, which we're not supposed to do.
Right. And that's the part that breaks the church, right? That we are so affiliated and we are our picture of ourselves is so wrapped up in our religiosity and our political beliefs and ideologies and our cultural beliefs and ideologies that our self-image is no longer wrapped up in following Jesus, in seeing Jesus ahead of us and saying, well, where Jesus is where I want to be. And that is my self-image, is to get from here to there, right? And now we're totally okay with like, well, hey, as long as Ron DeSantis likes me, as long as Donald Trump likes me, as long as Mark Driscoll likes me, as long as Franklin Graham likes me, well, that's good enough. Well, I'm sorry, but it's not good enough. These are just men who put on their pants one leg at a time like anybody else, except for Franklin Graham, who likes to leave his unzippered around women that are not his wife.
I wasn't going to say that.
Well, I think it needs to be said. I think that Americans in particular have short memories. And now that he's on his comeback tour and making tons and tons of money doing guest speaker gigs, I think we ought to remember a little bit that this is a guy who maybe needs to have more humility than he does speaking gigs.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess I would want to add to this is that we can get really trapped in this idea of, I need to believe certain things. I need to think certain things. And that's to a point true, right? If you're going to sit there and say that we don't need to teach the Old Testament because it's Jewish, I'm going to have some words with you. Yeah. But so there is a point to that. But the thing is that a lot of people in a certain camp, and I'm not going to define that camp, but I think you'll know like the kinds of people I mean. Like they get really caught up in what they believe, what they
Yeah.
think, and they think that their Christianity is dependent on how they think and how they believe. Noticing the fact that God, throughout the Old Testament forward, is much more concerned with what's the reality that we're creating around us.
Right.
Because if we think the quote unquote right things, but we produce a reality that it is not what God defines as a just reality, we are just an epic fail mode.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's the perfect way to cap that off. I couldn't have said it any better.
All right. Well, I did something right.
Hey, let's move right along here. We know that the mission of this podcast is to talk about the dumb things that churches do. And one of the really dumb things churches do is pretend to think about serious solutions for relevancy when really the last thing they want are serious solutions, because that would mean they'd have to change. And so I've got an article here from the Christian Post. The number one reason true believers leave a church. And once again, I want to give these guys a ribbon for well-constructed headline, because that is a headline that makes you want to click it. Like, I want to know the answer to this question. This podcast is built on that question. Like, why are people leaving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, so to my disappointment, Robin Schumacher, who's titled in his byline as exclusive columnist, not just columnist or executive columnist or chief columnist, but exclusive columnist.
That just means nobody else will hire you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So I read this with great interest, wanting to know, what has he identified as being critical to understanding why people are leaving the church?
I want to hear what this answer is. Oh, bad. So bad.
For them and me, it's all about being enabled to submit to God an acceptable form of worship while they're present in the assembly. When that can't happen, the spirit within them demands action. Quote, leaving, being the action. So for them and me, it's all about being enabled to submit to God an acceptable form of worship while they're present in the assembly.
Yeah, I can tell you for a fact that's not the reason that I have chosen to walk out of any church in my life.
Can we be real for a second? That is just a word salad.
Oh yeah,
Like, that is a word salad that means like nothing.
yeah. I'm not being enabled or empowered to submit the right forms to the IRS or whatever. Like
An acceptable form of worship.
like I don't know that anybody has left a church because they don't feel like they're being allowed to worship God genuinely. There are certainly people that will leave a church because like a worship style is not theirs. Like if you come from like a liturgical background, going to a gospel church,
Yeah.
it's not going to be a great place for you, perhaps.
Right.
And vice
Right.
versa. But I've left churches because the people there, what's the word I want to look for? Displayed a faith that was garbage.
Yeah, so let me give some examples further in this quote unquote article, which is mostly like this guy's not this what's this person's name? Robin.
Yes.
A lot of this actually comes from John MacArthur and is just kind of reworded. Okay.
Oh, yeah, because John MacArthur knows what he's
Yeah.
talking about.
Exactly, right? So here's some examples of why people would leave the church, right? When the message is devoid of the word, demonstrates lack of deep study beforehand, quotes Psychology Today more than the Bible. When the music lacks theological meaning, is void of biblical references. When sacraments like baptism and communion are mangled. When church attendees dishonor God by demonstrating their smartphone and social media addiction during service. This is the reason why people are leaving church, because people are in the pews on their smartphone. That's why people are leaving the church.
Yeah, I cannot help but notice how like most of that description described Joel Osteen's church.
Yeah, right. The most popular churches in all the country
Which,
display all of these. Yeah.
I would argue is the church that you should be walking out of, because, like I sat down and I watched several sermons from Joel Osteen,
Yeah.
and
I'm
in
sorry.
in one of them, did he ever actually quote scripture?
Yeah.
The other two, he didn't quote scripture at all. In the one, he did quote scripture. He quoted one verse out of context incorrectly and then moved on from it as if
Right.
it bore no point in him making his
Right.
point. So it's like the thing, like people flock, pardon the pun, to Joel Osteen's church, but he's doing all these things that John MacArthur says that people leave churches for.
Right. And by the way, let's define terms here. So we live in a country where you can throw a stone in any direction and hit a church, right? So of course, church attenders have developed a fast food mentality. Like, have it your way. If you want special sauce and extra pickles, go to church A.
Can you please rethink that metaphor, given some of the articles we've talked about?
Right. But if you want Southern barbecue or grits, then you go to church B or whatever, right? I don't care. Everybody who wants to play church hopscotch, feel free. There's a church that's going to fit your particular, your particular brand of flannel,
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's not what we're thinking about. And that's this list that he gives. That's kind of what's happening there. Is people are leaving your church because they don't like your kind of music, and they're going to find the church that sings the old hymns again. Who cares, right? Like, we're thinking bigger picture here. We're wondering why people are leaving church altogether, right? And it's not because of any of this crap, right? It's because churches are terrible and Christian leaders are terrible, and they're doing horrible things with money, with other people's lives, with their, I mean, literally, like when you sexually abuse a little girl, you are ripping away her entire life. You are condemning her to a life of therapy and of a terrible self-image, and so if you think that sexually abusing a child somehow sits at the same level of, I don't like the worship music, I can't dance to it, and it doesn't have a groove, like if you think those are the same things, like we are on different planets at this point.
Yeah, like you know what? I'm not going to add anything to that because I think you said it good enough, and I'm just going to add rage, and that's not going to be
exactly right.
It'll be just unproductive rage.
Like you do that, like that effect where like the screen goes in and out like Star Trek, like like rage. Yeah. I think that's enough to say about that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go from rage to just kind of like, before we talk about this next story, let me just tell a little story and preface. Michael W. Smith, Christian CCM artist, one of the most popular CCM artists of all time, right? He enjoyed a brief bit of like commercial success in the big sense with a song called "Go West, Young Man," and it incredibly increased his reach and allowed him to tour, like do like big stadium tours on the regular, right? An incredible opportunity for a man of faith to do that kind of guerrilla ministry and bring the message of the gospel to much bigger audiences than a typical Billy Graham excursion could typically do, right?
Yeah.
But he got mad that people were there throwing around beach balls and having a good time and not actually listening to him proclaim the gospel. And so he decided he will never ever do that again, and he will only ever preach to the choir. And so in that same vein, I was like, no, that's not the story. So let's not go there. Okay. So the story is this: ChristianPost.com, biblical investors renouncing the ECG. And I'm not ESG. I'm sorry, not ECG.
Like electrocardiogram?
Yeah. That would be fantastic, though. And I'm not exactly sure what the ESG is, except to know that serious investors who have millions or billions of dollars to invest, you don't just like play the stock market like regular people do. You have access to databases and funds and avenues of investing large sums of money, right? But those large investor pools typically have philosophies that go along with them, and so the ECG, they've got philosophies that on the one hand sound good, return on investment, ecologically friendly, sustainability, morality, things like that, right? Things that are not just things that are money, but things that are bigger picture than money, right?
Yeah.
But this particular group of Christian investors back out of this. Like they went in thinking like, well, we're going to be cowboys and we're going to be rogues and we're going to go in here and show them that not only can you do things with morality and ethics, but you can do things biblically and make a heap ton of money, right?
Right, because
there's a
that's what
problem.
Jesus preached.
That's what Jesus wanted you was to do, is make a heap ton of money, right? But once again, they found that, like if they're going to be openly anti-LGBTQ, if they're going to be openly, anti-Muslim, if they're going to be openly anti-atheist, like a lot of doors that they wanted open for them to invest their money are going to close, right?
As a rule, that kind of thing happens in that world.
Right. So do they stand in the pocket and fight for what they believe is right? No. What do? They take their ball and leave.
Well, I mean, name 800 times that's happened before.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we haven't gotten to the disaffiliation watch part of this episode.
Yeah, right. We're not even there yet. Yeah. Yeah. So once again, how it breaks the church is fairly obvious, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we just talked on the last episode about this momentum that's gaining in a masculine, strong picture of what it means to be a Christian, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we get example of Christians just being wusses. Like if this is the picture you're going to invest in, like then you need to live up to it when the time's appropriate. Like if you believe that standing for the gospel is a better financial solution than just straight up capitalism, then you need to stand in there and prove it. Because once you back out with your tail tucked between your legs, you make the point for everybody, like, no man, straight up capitalism works. Like don't try to mess us up with the word you'd use, mysticism. Like we don't want to deal with spirituality and religion. Like what we know is profit and loss. We know about earnings, we know about layoffs, we know about supply and demand. These are market fundamentals. And we will do that across all markets, regardless of religious beliefs, regardless of sexual orientation, right? And so it's just another example where failing to stand up for your beliefs results in the non-Christian world kind of going, yeah, that's about right. Like the Christians are just kind of crazy.
Well, and the worst part of this story to me is that you have this group of Christian investors, which I almost want to argue, if you're a Christian, you shouldn't be making investments your profession, but that's just me being a snob, but it's they want to demonstrate that, well, you can be very moral and ethical and Christian about your investment and you can make all this money. Of course, they never seem to have analyzed the question, is seeking to make all this money even the Christian thing to do here?
Right.
And I'm not saying you can't go out and earn a living. That's absurd. But when you're trying to play the game that the non-Christian world wants to play, and so that you can play the game as good as they can. Yeah. That's kind of like saying, I can be a better bodybuilder than you if I just never use protein powders and, things like creatine supplements, and I don't use weights above 50 pounds. You can't just choose how you play the game and expect to win the game.
Yeah.
The game has a set of rules and an expected outcome for a win condition.
Yeah.
And it seems like, that's we complain a lot about how, we have all these, I forget the guy's name, just really snake looking dude, has an airplane, was, not Ted Haggard or something like that. There's so many of these guys, right? They just, they prey on people using Christianity to do it, and just to become dementedly wealthy. And it's let's stop trying to show non-Christians how good we are at doing their things, but in a Christian way. Let's just do the Christian things in a Christian way and prove how good that is as a goal and as a result.
There you go. I like it. I like it. That'll
Okay.
preach. All right. Moving on. All right. Okay. So I know one of the topics we like coming back to over and over again, and that you certainly can't be tired of hearing about, is the patriarchy. We love the patriarchy. Well, as
It
men, I
explains
mean, I get
so many
yeah,
things. Like, why do
yeah,
I drink non-sweetened carbonated flavored water? Patriarchy.
patriarchy.
Hmm.
All right. So Christianity Today. Most evangelical pastors say women can lead Bible studies.
Oh, how
Thank
generous
you.
of you.
Thank you. That's not condescending at all.
Not in the
So,
slightest.
okay, so I'm gonna take a hard turn. Like I'm not even gonna go to the obvious place. Like we're gonna start out like just kind of like think different kind of modes here. Okay.
Hmm.
Here's the deal. When you go to church, you know you're gonna get like 15 to 30 minutes of some repetitive worship songs, right? Great. No problem. Followed by put some money in the pot and hey, turn around and greet your neighbor. Followed by somewhere between 20 to 45 minutes of a message that won't make anybody too mad, right? Followed by grace and peace, everybody have a great week, right? That is the format. That is the
Yes.
format, right? Like not everybody does what like we talked about a couple episodes where like you dress down your entire church because they haven't bought you a watch. That is not normal, okay? So like the normal course of events is you're going to get a sermon and that sermon's not going to be too spicy because if it's too spicy then people stop putting money in the basket, right?
Right.
Right? So but here's the thing. Because of that,
Hmm.
the pastor on Sunday morning is not going to give you like the real stuff, the stuff that you want to know about, the stuff that you need to know about, the stuff that
Right.
you really want to dive deep in. You know where that happens? That happens in Bible study. Like these are the topics we really want to know about. We're willing to set aside extra time in the week to meet together in a smaller group
Hmm.
where we can ask lots of questions and really get into the meat of a topic. So these pastors are saying that women can actually do the more important teaching in the Bible study on Wednesday night.
So,
That's what that says to me, you
so
know?
like, I mean, that does highlight an esteem issue within the church is that,
Yeah.
the role of a pastor preaching is seen as more exclusive than
Yeah.
the role of leading a Bible study. And of course, we've talked about, evangelicalism, you see complementarianism, the belief that, it's the belief that men and women are equal in dignity, but that men just have the better jobs.
Yeah.
Um, it's patriarchy.
Yeah.
It's misogynistic is what it is. And it's kind of funny that it's like this article clearly is trying to say like, look how progressive the church is, except
Yeah.
what
It's just not.
what they're not telling you is that in a very lot of these churches that are so gracious to allow women to lead a Bible study, a lot of those will only let a woman lead a Bible study of other women. They will not allow a woman
Oh.
to lead a Bible study a man attends.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, like because
Yeah.
once you get to like the more religiously conservative branch of that's when that kicks in.
Right. Yeah. So, we talk about the glass ceiling a lot, right? Women can do the hard work in the church, but they can't have the cool titles.
Hmm.
And that's all that is. But like there's like another I don't we've used this I've overused this. There's another layer to this onion. Just in like we know patriarchy. We know that it's a male dominated world. We know that women continue to have to fight for their place in society. We continue to ignore the incredibly important roles women have in the Bible to the
Mhm.
point where we don't even tell their stories. We only tell the stories of the important men. And it's an incredible disservice to the way then, because we don't talk about the important women of the Bible, we don't see any women as important. And that is an incredible disservice, not only to the body of Christ, but to the headship of Christ as well.
And that's really shameful, to a degree, one might argue that Catholic Church has this better than evangelicals because
Yeah.
there are lots of women saints. There's the veneration of Mary. Whether or not you agree with it, it's still
Right.
putting a woman in an important position as the woman who gave birth to Jesus. And I think that's a very meaningful thing, even though, the Catholic Church says women can't be priests. So like, that doesn't kind of go all the way right, but it's like
Right.
There's this belief that masculinity and a certain version of masculinity is what deserves to be in these positions. So, like, if you're a woman, you know, like you can't do this. But if you're a man who doesn't demonstrate that he's masculine enough, I'm trying to be very euphemistic about it. So people
Sure.
have to, like, take the ambiguity and go with it. But you know
Yeah.
what I'm talking about, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, then you can't be a leader either. It's like, you know, it's absurd that
Yeah. So
we don't give them, like, because I'm sorry, but like having had a woman pastor, there are a lot of great things about having a woman pastor.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Let me just say this. I don't want to do a whole Bible study here, and I certainly don't want to. Yeah, like we're already in at 30 minutes, so I don't want to go down too
Mhm.
deep of a rabbit hole. But I do want to ask everybody for your homework this week to go to Romans 16, and I want you to do some study and research about the great Andronicus and Junia. Okay, and Google this. Was Junia simply a follower, or was Junia one of the apostles? And kind of see what kind of rabbit hole that takes you down.
Yeah, oh gosh.
No, leave it alone. That's homework. That's for like the most dedicated of our viewers to go down that rabbit hole.
Well, I was
But
just gonna say, like, I listened to a podcast where the
yeah,
guest was specifically talking about Junia,
yeah,
and I really wish I could remember what that
yeah,
podcast was,
yeah.
because it was amazing.
Right? Yeah, but definitely go down that rabbit hole this week. Women aren't just to be seen and not heard. They're not just to lead other women, and they're not just to lead other places than the pulpit. They were incredibly important to the early formation of the church. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say.
Post show.
Okay. Moving right along. Moving right along. That's from the Muppets, right? We just watched
Yeah,
the Muppets
every
earlier
time
today
you
at the
say
household.
"moving right along," I hear Kermit the
Moving-
Frog feeling fancy free, or it's not the best Kermit the Frog. I know. I apologize.
Hey, Kermit was a great philosopher. How many people like it's not easy being green? I mean, like word, man, word.
Well, he should have been born a white cisgender male.
Nice. I was like, man, you all the instruments, and you decided to learn banjo, Kermit. Why don't we start there with bad decisions? Okay.
Okay, come on. Bella Fleck is a banjo player, and he's
This is true.
amazeballs.
He's a badass. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on here. Real persecution watch.
All right.
So we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but not being able to say the Pledge of Allegiance is not true persecution. Like it's kind of
You mean it's not?
like it's certainly something to debate and talk about, and it's frustrating and all those things. But like, so we have a pair of articles today in Real Persecution Watch. Nigerian journalist jailed for reporting attacks on Christians, jailed for just reporting the attacks, not even a Christian himself. Okay, and gunman killed Christian lawyer in Nigeria. 4 nuns kidnapped. Okay, so when you get upset because like somebody at the grocery store says namaste or says assalamu alaikum,
Or
that
happy
is not-
holidays.
exactly, they don't say Merry Christmas. That is not persecution, right? Like it's like if it's frustrating to you, it's frustrating to you, and you're allowed to feel however you feel. But let's choose a better word than persecution, because there are people going to jail and losing their lives for proclaiming Jesus, and that's not you. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And now, like disaffiliation watch. This,
Yes.
I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I said this kind of thing would happen.
Yep.
Not because I'm a genius, but because, duh.
Yeah, because of course, yeah. Yeah, court rules the Episcopal Church not entitled to 6 of the 14 properties that the diocese has been ordered to return. So
Yeah.
this is kind of related to the UMC thing, right?
Mhm.
There's a diocese that wants to separate from the larger Episcopal Church, and they went through the court process. And originally, the court process in South Carolina said 14. There are 14 churches that you need to return back. But 6 of those churches that ended up were able to somehow financially and legally maneuver themselves so that they are no longer part of the quote unquote the trust, whatever that means,
Yeah.
and therefore are not property of the Episcopal Church and are not to be returned. And the reason the only reason I put this in here is because we should expect to see more of this, like especially in the UMC and the Southern Baptists, as churches try to figure out ways to disaffiliate. They're going to be looking for winning strategies, and this happens to be one of them.
Yeah, and it goes down to like the UMC is the United Methodist Church is the same way, right? So it's like all churches are property held in common,
right?
So a congregation cannot just up and leave. Southern Baptist Conference, where like its churches are like basically the unit of control, for lack of a better way of saying it. It sounds kind of bad, but it's like they can just disaffiliate and be like, yeah, tomorrow we're just going to be an independent Baptist church. That's it.
Right.
And no problems.
Right. So it's going to be interesting to see, like, especially in the UMC world, it's going to be interesting to see churches use this strategy and publicly publicly open up their finances and say, look, we're like, maybe on the paperwork, we're part of this, body, but like, we're not sucking anything from the denomination. In fact, our money flows into the denomination for them to use elsewhere. There's no part of this operation that's dependent on the larger denomination at all. So it's going to be interesting to see if that's a winning argument.
Yeah, it'll be heartbreaking to see the continued disaffiliations, because now that the Episcopal Church has joined in on the disaffiliation wagon, it's more heartbreak that people can't get along. But it'll be interesting to see what happens, at least.
If you know that the thing is about to break, then the fact that it's going to break isn't so important. It's how it breaks that becomes more important, right? And that it breaks as peacefully as it can, I guess. I know, I'm right there with you. Like, it sickens me that this is even happening, but it is happening, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a divorce.
Yeah.
I mean, in a very, very literal sense, because when like a church, it's like we are married to each other, in that way, right, as being part of the body of Christ, and then to split that apart, I mean, that really is like like a husband and a wife, or we'll just say a spouse and a spouse, to find themselves splitting and then having this common property between them, having children, like in a very real sense, it's like churches, we have children in our churches, what are they going to feel when we can no longer go to the same church as the people that were babysitting us as a kid. I don't understand why, and parents aren't going to explain why very well, probably. So it's just it tears me apart for that reason, and I really wish like this would just stop, because like every time you see this process happening, it's like more people who should be holding each other tightly and Christian love refusing to do so.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. All right. Updates. I find something incredibly satisfying about closing the circle on stories that we've done in the past, which is why I'm doing more of these. But in two articles that are completely and utterly predictable, right? Because when you do something publicly stupid, like, then there has to, like, you got to do the apology tour now, right?
Well, like you
that's
said,
just part and parcel. Yeah.
Do stupid things or play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Yeah. So a couple episodes ago, we talked about the pastor who dressed down his church because they didn't buy him the Movado watch he wanted, and we even included a little snippet of the video. I just saw the preview of that video. It's good. Yeah. So obviously the thing went viral in a way that he didn't think it was gonna, and he's been forced to record an apology. I think in his mind, it was an apology that I don't think he really understands. Like, he understands what he's apologizing for, but not really. Like, obviously it looked stupid and it looked selfish, and it did not paint the church in a very pleasing portrait, right?
Yeah.
I don't think he understands that the video is kind of like a confirmation of all the worst things we think about these stupid prosperity gospel preachers, right? It's like, it's there now. It's like it's saying the quiet part out loud. Like, I'm just all about the material stuff. Like, and now, like, he doesn't quite understand that he is now the living embodiment of that.
Yeah, and like in a quick turnaround apology like this,
Yeah.
like, okay, you do something dumb in public.
Yeah.
It went viral. You did it because you thought you could get away with it.
Right.
You thought you were entitled to it. A person doesn't generally go from believing that they are entitled to something to a few days later accepting that they weren't entitled to it.
Yeah.
You know, like that's a like a much bigger paradigm shift in one's thinking than is generally brought about by, you know, something like this. Like there should have been
Right.
like an intervention, like a real confrontation between like him and his congregation or something like that, or other church leaders.
Yeah.
Not like, oh, the Twitterverse, you know, owns you.
Yeah. I think so. Like, I think in his mind, he thinks that the problem is the Movado watch. Like, oh, instead of talking about the Movado watch, I should have talked about like
A Mercedes.
no. Like instead of doing that, I should have talked about building more room for our youth ministry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like oh, you guys don't care enough to put money in the basket for children's ministry, and he thinks that's where the disconnect is. Like, no, brother, that's not where the disconnect is.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm gonna have to borrow from, you know, Jane Silent Bob, clown shoes.
Yeah. So let's move on. We kind of raked him over the coals enough.
I think so.
We talked about the Canadian megachurch that once again another megachurch where the pastor was accused of sexual abuse, and thankfully and quite refreshingly, the church has finally come out and said, yeah, you know, it is. There's an investigation, and this is what's happening, and it's been substantiated, you know. And I guess that's a nice first step, but it's like it's not where you need to be, right? Where you need to be is like, we didn't wait on this stuff, and we didn't wait for substantiation. When somebody came across, and you know, when it became a thing that somebody has accused a pastor of sexual abuse, we stopped the presses. We put the pastor on paid or unpaid leave, and we went into serious investigation mode right away. Like, we didn't go into damage control mode. We didn't go and sweep it under the rug mode. We went into figure out how to support the abused and figure out what to do about the abuser. You know? And that's where these churches need to be, and they just aren't. They're just not there yet. They're still so concerned about damage control first and foremost.
No, and you know, I think, you know, we've highlighted so much like mega churches just give rise to this sort of thing. I mean, it's at this point, like, I'm just going to assume that like if your church is too big, you know, like, you're sexually abusing people.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I'm not going to go that far, but yeah. I mean, certainly, I would go as far as to say, like, to get to the mega church level, like, corruption is part of the deal. That's just part of the deal. You know, now I don't know that corruption runs into sexual abuse, but corruption is part of the deal.
I want to disagree with you. I want to disagree with you so bad.
Okay.
But the truth is that, yeah, I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I don't think you can't get a church to be that big without playing some silly buggers here and there.
Exactly right. All right, moving along here.
Feeling fancy free.
Someday we'll find it.
Oh,
the
no.
rainbow. Yes, that's the best song.
We're
ever,
gonna
dude.
get copyright blocked.
Right. Okay. All right. So, in the ongoing soap opera that has become Pastor Jean Gerber in South Africa, he is part of the Hillsong money-making machine, and somehow he's made it his personal mission to just kind of keep commenting in ways that are kind of silly and borderline harassing.
Okay.
And there was one day where he was being so frequent in his comments and so demanding that, like, I basically lost it, right?
Yeah.
And I found the email of the church, and I'm just like, who is this nut job, and why is he harassing us? And why do I have to put up with it? And what, is this how my time is spent, dealing with your nut job? Do something about him. Right. And so his comment this week is, do you email all people's employers when they ask you pressing questions about why you're breaking down the church instead of building it up? And the answer is yes. Well, typically when harassment happens in any form, we usually do what we do to stop it. Right. And so far, we've been pretty nice about it. Like, we went to your church and said, what kind of pastors are you developing there that, like, harassing people for the sake of their next sermon is kind of their modus operandi, you know? And we've pretty much told you that we're not gonna, like, just kind of feed your need, whatever that is, for recognition and for comment wars. We told you, if you got something to, you want to argue about, make your video. And if you surprise us and say something meaningful and interesting and thoughtful, we might reply to it. But as of yet, you're the guy who wears, ripped T-shirts and jeans covered in the tattoos, preaching about how to be countercultural. So don't color us impressed or, like, scared or anything yet. Maybe you should go back to doing what you get paid to do, what you've been called to do, and it's pastoring youth. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna just defend you against this
No.
Jean Gerber dude, or is it Jean? Jean? I'm gonna assume it's Jean.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to just like defend you because you're my friend, right? But it's like, this guy, it's like, like when you're breaking the church down instead of building it up. No, breaking the church down is when you're sexually abusing the women in your church. Breaking your church down is when you, abuse people physically for the sake of, quote unquote, building them up spiritually. Breaking the church is when you are stealing money from the church. Breaking the church is when you are splitting churches up over petty differences. And if you want to complain about my friend breaking down the church, then you need to complain about Isaiah and Jeremiah and Micah and Malachi and Joel, because they complained about God's people, about, the people of Israel. They complained about them way worse than we're complaining about the things that, the modern church in America and partly worldwide is doing. So if you think that what we're doing is breaking the church down, then you need to hate all the prophets, because they were, they were basically taking, like Israel's nose and rubbing it in their business, because they were sinning and they were not honoring God. It is not breaking down the church to point out how people who are supposed to be honoring God are not honoring God. It is not breaking down the church to have a podcast where we tell people, hey, if this happens to you, call it out. We want the people listening to this podcast to stop these things happening in their churches and in their denominations. That is building the church up. We want people who have left the church to come back to the church because, hey, this is a great place when you can find some good people.
Right.
And so it's like, you have to stop putting the church as the thing we need to defend. Like in the last episode, we talked about Phil Cook talking about loyalty being a problem. You're loyal to the church to a point where you cannot question the church, which will cause it to degrade and to rot from within. And that is not something that we can abide by. So sorry, we'll email whoever we want to. End of sermon.
Yeah. Right. Well, hey, I'm gonna cry. Thank you for that. I appreciate that, Jean. Like we're like the goal is not to come down hard on you. The goal is just to remind you that this is not your job to harass people on the internet. You've got holier things to do. You've got a righteous job in the name of the Most High God. So eyes on the prize. Is where I want to leave that. But I do thank you, Mark, for that. Was really, like, truly, like, that was really meaningful to me. Thank you.
I was trying to keep the rage level from going where
right.
my body wanted it to.
No, yeah, totally. Hey, there was a point where I told Jean in the comments, like, we're done commenting until you do a video. So any comment that he made previous to that is still up. So, like, we're not here to squash anybody or to quash anybody's free speech. So, so it is what it is, and it's all there for you to read. Be easy on him. No flaming him or anything like that. It is what it is. It was what it was. And the only reason I put the comment here is because I thought it was the end of this, and I just want to make sure that we all understand that everybody's got a job. And harassing us and us harassing him is of no benefit to anybody. All right?
Yeah.
That being said, we love hearing from you. We don't mind hearing the negative. We just want to make sure everything's in its right place. If you got something negative to say, if you got something positive to say, if you have something offbeat to say, by all means say it. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. We'd love to hear your comments. YouTube not only has a thumbs up button, it's got a thumbs down button as well. So make use of the buttons, the subscribe buttons, the notification buttons, the links to the different websites and all that stuff. Do all the clicking and help us or hurt us with the algorithm. Whatever you need to do, we're okay. And if you urgently need to get something in front of our eyes, by all means, feel free to email us at churcheslanepodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, and I gotta wonder, because I kind of ranted there, and I'm not going to apologize for that. But we do our shtick about Rob Bell every episode, right? And I do kind of wonder, honestly, like how would he have handled that?
Yeah.
I'm sure he would have been a lot more diplomatic than I was there.
Yeah.
But that's why we look up to him, and that's why we keep doing this thing where we want him on our podcast, because we really do respect him that much.
Absolutely. Rob Bell, we are waiting. We are waiting. We are waiting. Don't make us wait.
Yeah. And with that, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.